I sacrificed $160,000 for his family. Then, he chose another woman. But before I share my story, please take a minute of your precious time to support our channel. Your support and love keeps us going. My name is Zuri Bennett. I'm 33 and a senior manager at a data analytics firm called North Axis Data in Lake Marin, Illinois. The work is relentless and precise. 12 years of sharpening my focus since college. I wasn't born with a safety net. Respect, I learned early, is something you build with overtime hours and quiet grit. Back when I rented a tiny room off Maple Street, I juggled empty dinners against used textbooks and still clawed my way into a full scholarship. It paid off. While many friends were still figuring out their lane, I'd already carved out mine. At work, my director hands me the fire drill projects. My team calls me Steel Zuri. Not because I'm cold, but because I'm consistent, clear, fair, and unshaken when decisions get heavy. Underneath, though, I'm a black woman who still wants what's simple, a hand to hold when the day wrings you dry. Dating never fit neatly around my schedule. A few men drifted off when they realized my paycheck or title didn't make me smaller. One even said, "You make me feel like less of a man." I laughed, then stared at my reflection later, wondering what rule I'd broken by refusing to dim. One chilly evening in early spring, Tasha, my closest friend, begged me to stop by her husband's birthday gathering. I wanted my couch and silence, not strangers and small talk, but Tasha pressed. I gave her an hour. That's where I met Quentin Hale. He didn't fish for attention. No oversized laugh, no practice lines. Just an easy smile that softened the room. "You're Zuri, right?" he asked, catching me mid-sip by the window. "How'd you guess?" Tasha said if I spotted a beautiful woman standing alone like she's reconsidering her life choices, say hello. I cracked up for the first time in weeks. Conversation with Quentin was weightless and honest. He worked in people operations consulting, had his share of breakups, and carried himself like a man who listened more than he spoke. We traded numbers. I didn't overthink. I just felt light. He started with good mornings. Check-ins after marathon meetings. Random clips of goofy puppies because I once mentioned the Cocker Spaniel I adored as a kid. After 2 months, he said he wanted something real. "I don't care if you pull longer hours or bring home more than me," Quentin told me. "I care if you feel safe and happy with me." I said yes. A year later, we married in a small garden on the north side of Lake Marin, not far from where we'd had our first date under a mist of spring rain. It wasn't extravagant. It was enough. His parents, Maurice and Laverne, were warm from the start. Laverne knit me a soft shawl. "Office AC is sneaky," she said, and Maurice teased Quentin. "My son is blessed to marry a woman with a mind like a vault and a heart to match." I laughed through those dinners and allowed myself to believe that maybe, finally, I'd stumbled into the kind of home you exhale inside. Quentin moved into my 2-bedroom condo near Roosevelt Park, 15 minutes from North Axis. Marriage felt peaceful at first, shared chores, weekend meals, and his hand on my forehead at night. Then, one crisp evening in October, after I returned from a client visit in North Crest, Ohio, Quentin sat beside me and said, carefully, "I need to talk about my parents." Morris's blood pressure was creeping up, and Laverne was getting forgetful. "I'm worried," he said. I understood. But they lived across town, and we were planted near my office. Quentin took a breath. "What if we convert their old place into a duplex, separate space for us, close enough to help them? The house has a deep lot and a solid base. Renovations would be about $130,000. I've talked to a construction friend." I stared at my heels on the mat, then at him. "You mean fully move in next door?" "2 homes under one roof," he said. "We'd lock the connecting hall. You'd keep your independence. My folks love you. No one expects traditional daughter-in-law anything." I carried the question for a week like a pebble in my shoe, small, constant, impossible to ignore. After dinner with his parents that Friday, I said yes. Laverne's eyes filled. "Thank you, Zuri. I know this isn't easy." Plans moved quickly. The design split the property into 2 distinct living spaces with a shared corridor we could bolt. From the street, it would read like paired townhomes. Inside, 2 separate worlds. Quentin was animated, tile samples, paint decks, garden beds. I joined the conversations, but the bigger choices, loan options, material vendors, seemed to slide toward him and his parents. One night, reviewing a spreadsheet of projected costs, I asked, "So, how are we splitting the $130,000? Quentin blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, our share versus your parents' share." A long pause. Then, softer, "I was hoping you could front the costs for now. They're in a rough patch." My back straightened. "You're asking me to cover it?" "Not forever," he said, taking my hand. "I'll pay you back in time." I said nothing. Inside me, a quiet door creaked open, one I didn't recognize yet. Behind it waited a truth that would pull the word family apart and spell it differently. I told myself I'd be practical. I told myself this was love. I told myself 100 comforting things. But the first hairline crack had formed. The cruise broke ground on a gray Tuesday. Framing went up fast. I signed off on deposits for permits, engineering, and materials. I'm not one to nitpick receipts, but I don't like fog either. When the invoices started landing in my inbox, I asked Quentin for a clear breakdown. "How are we splitting the $130,000? I asked again, this time with the spreadsheet open between us. He rubbed his neck. "Babe, I was hoping you could front it until things level out. Mom and Dad, they're in a bind." "In a bind how?" He hesitated. "They took on some franchise investments with a friend. A smoothie and salad chain. It folded. They rolled one loan into another. It's around $175,000 now." My glass didn't shatter, but something in me did. "You're telling me when the slab is poured?" "I wasn't hiding it," he said, eyes down. "I thought I could fix it before it touched you. But if they miss another payment, the bank could come for the house." By then I had already advanced about $96,000, architect fees, deposits, materials. I stared at the figures and felt the floor tilt. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice flat. "Help them bridge the worst of it," he said, taking my hand. "You're the only person I trust to keep this family steady. I'll pay you back, Zuri. I swear." Love makes smart women generous and generous women targets. I wired $88,000 from my savings to settle the largest past due note, then set up $6,500 monthly transfers to chip at the rest, every payment documented, every email saved, every message archived. Laverne called me in tears, thanking me. Maurice sent a shaky note about angels who walk like ordinary folk. I wanted to believe them, but over time, the off notes got louder. Quentin stopped contributing to joint expenses with any regular rhythm. When I asked to revisit the budget, he bristled. "Why does it always come back to money with you?" he snapped. I let it pass and kept paying, renovation overruns, corridor windows, a second coat for the hall, all of it landing on my card. After 13 months, Laverne called, bubbly. "You're remarkable, baby. We're almost clear. Maybe $28,000 left." I did the math. Between the lump sum, the monthly transfers, and construction costs, I'd crossed $140,000 out of pocket with no formal agreement, just trust. Then came the evening the rain pinned itself to the windows, and I arrived home early, quiet as breath. Laughter rolled from the living room, Morris's baritone, Laverne's sing-song, Quentin's voice riding the middle. "Gotta hand it to Q," Maurice said. "He found a wife who delivers and keeps it sweet." Laverne chimed in, light as crystal. "Debt nearly gone. House looking like a model home. That girl is a fortune wrapped in a smile." Quentin's voice slid in cool. "Once everything's set, we can give her space. She'll ask questions, she always does." A pause. A woman's voice I didn't recognize answered, amused. "Stretch it a few more months. She's committed. After that, you'll be fine." I stood in the dark hallway, palm pressed to my bag, heart pounding so hard the edges of the world fuzzed. I didn't storm in. I didn't cry. I turned, left as quietly as I'd come, and booked a room across town. That night I texted, "Work emergency. Crashing near the office. Back tomorrow. Stay safe. Love you," Quentin replied. Something inside me cooled to glass. I went home the next day with a tiny recorder stitched into my coat seam. A business associate joined dinner. I poured wine and smiled while my insides took notes. After dishes, I opened my laptop and built a private file. Every transfer, invoice, message, and casually phrased request he'd ever sent for one more bridge payment. I shared the encrypted archive with an attorney I trusted and wrote 5 words. Hold. Do not engage yet. Meanwhile, I kept moving like the old Zuri. Steady, helpful, unbothered. I increased the monthly transfers to $7,000 to speed the good news, and while they relaxed into my generosity, I started studying the title. When we began the project, I'd suggested clean co-ownership to match our 2 worlds, 1 roof plan. Now I asked a real estate specialist to restructure the paperwork under the pretense of tax optimization and municipal assessment relief. Quentin signed where I flagged. He didn't ask questions. He never had to, not with me. Laverne kept calling me our blessing. Maurice dropped off cobbler on Sundays. Quentin kissed my cheek over simmering stew and whispered, "You're doing so much for this family." I nodded and filed the moment with the rest. A strong woman doesn't need to shout to be heard. She just needs the right proof at the right time. I didn't know the hour my plan would bloom. I did know this. The next dollar I spent would not secure anyone else's comfort. It would purchase my freedom and the clean exit my future deserved. By the time spring melted into summer, the duplex gleamed like a showpiece. Neighbors complimented the fresh siding and neat landscaping. To outsiders, we looked like a couple building the dream. Inside, I was watching cracks widen. I'd poured nearly $160,000 between construction costs and debt service. Quentin's promises of "I'll pay you back" hung like laundry in the rain, visible, flimsy, never quite dry. When I asked for his pay stubs to rebuild our budget, his jaw tightened. "You don't trust me? Why does it always come back to money with you, Zuri?" I didn't answer. Tired silence was safer than another argument. Still, I kept receipts. Every bank transfer, every message asking me to just cover this last bit. At night, while Quentin and Maurice argued over sports, I compiled folders of evidence. I didn't know what I'd use them for, but I knew they mattered. Months later, I stumbled onto the truth that cemented everything. I came home early from a meeting, slipped my shoes off, and froze in the corridor. Voices filtered through the vent. "She's reliable," Maurice said, his tone almost smug. Laverne laughed. "That girl's carrying this whole family. Who else would put up that kind of money with no questions asked?" Quentin's voice followed, flat and calculating. "Once the papers are final and the house is ours, we can ease her out. She's too smart to stay blind forever." A woman's voice, one I didn't recognize, added, "Stretch her just a little longer. By fall, it'll be wrapped." I stood there with my breath caught like a stone in my chest. They thought I'd never hear. They thought the joke would stay between them. But I heard, and I didn't storm in. I didn't weep. I walked out as though I'd forgotten my keys, drove until the highway lights blurred, and booked another room across town. That night, I texted Quentin again. "Late meetings. Staying near the office. Be safe. Love you," he wrote back. I stared at those words and felt nothing. The next day, I acted unchanged. Smiled, kissed his cheek, stirred soup in our shared kitchen. But inside, a storm turned quiet and precise. I brought home another recorder tucked into my coat lining. I cataloged every overheard slip, every careless confession disguised as banter. At the same time, I quietly moved to consolidate legal ownership of the renovated property. Under the guise of streamlining property tax obligations, Quentin signed documents transferring his half to me. He never read the fine print. On Sundays, Laverne still called me her precious blessing. Maurice dropped off peach cobbler. Quentin draped his arms around me in the kitchen and whispered, "You're doing so much, baby." I nodded and whispered back. But behind my steady smile, I knew. Every dollar, every receipt, every whispered recording was a brick. And one day, I'd stack them high enough to build my exit. Not with noise, not with rage, but with silence sharp enough to cut. By the 18th month of payments, I'd funneled nearly $180,000 through my accounts, renovations, debt settlements, endless last-minute emergencies. Outwardly, I remained the devoted wife and dutiful daughter-in-law. Inside, I was done being their financier. I called the primary bank holding the Hale family's outstanding balance. As the guarantor, I offered to settle the remainder in one payment, on one condition: full assignment of the debt to my name. They agreed without hesitation. From that moment, Maurice and Laverne's debt no longer belonged to a bank. It belonged to me. A week later, the title transfer was complete. The duplex, every wall I'd funded, every inch I designed, was registered solely under Zuri Bennett. Quentin signed the last form without even skimming it, distracted and smiling, the pen scratching his own undoing. I played my role to perfection. I cooked his favorite stew, laughed politely at Morris's jokes, accepted Laverne's knitted scarves. They thought I was still the generous angel who would never push back. But my attorney, Carla Jennings, was already holding an ironclad divorce petition and a full archive of evidence: bank transfers, recordings, receipts, even casual texts where Quentin asked for just one more bridge. Carla looked me in the eye during our strategy meeting. "Don't get mad. Don't get sloppy. Wait until everything is aligned, then press the button." So I did. The night before filing, I set the table with lasagna, salad, and lemon pie. Quentin clinked glasses with me, grinning. "Zuri, you really are the best thing that's ever happened to me." I met his eyes, steady. "Thank you for showing me who you really are." He chuckled, not realizing what I meant. The next morning, I slipped the divorce papers onto the kitchen counter beside the official notice naming me creditor of his parents' debt. I added a short note. "Good luck negotiating with your new lender. I have no interest in being generous." Then I walked out with my bag, my keys, and the last remnants of patience I'd ever give that house. 3 days later, my property manager called. "Ms. Bennett, someone just changed the locks on the duplex and claims you no longer own it." I drove straight over. The gate was chained with a new padlock, but my original key still turned in the side door. Quentin stood in the foyer, wearing the dress shirt I'd once given him, calm as a stranger. "Zuri," he said, steady but smug, "this isn't your home anymore. Go back to your new place." Behind him, a young woman with loose curls strolled out of the kitchen carrying juice. She smiled like I was trespassing. "My new girlfriend," Quentin announced flatly. "And my parents think we can all work something out if you stay here under a few conditions." My brow lifted. "Conditions? You pay rent, do the cooking, laundry, cleaning. Since the house is more crowded now, it's only fair." I laughed, deep, free, unstoppable. His face faltered. "You're asking me to pay rent and play maid in a house that's legally mine?" Quentin shrugged. "You left. I just rearranged things." I dialed my attorney on speaker. "Carla, it's me. File for trespassing, unlawful occupancy, and violation of property ownership, effective immediately." I turned back to Quentin, voice steady. "You, your parents, and this girlfriend have 3 hours to pack. If you're still here by noon, the police will escort you out." For the first time, he looked pale. "We were married," he began. "Were," I cut in, "and I don't recall ever saying I was stupid." I left him standing there in that doorway, silence trailing behind me like a banner. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, like a chain had been unlatched. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Within 72 hours, Carla had served a formal eviction demand. The Hale family had 7 days to vacate or face a civil suit. The letter outlined every detail: the deed in my name, the transferred debt in my control, and the evidence trail I'd been gathering for 2 years. Quentin called 5 times in one afternoon. I ignored each one. Finally, I texted, "Communicate through legal counsel only." He showed up at the first mediation slumped, his smooth confidence stripped away. "Zuri, if you push this, I'll lose everything." "You lost it," I replied evenly, "the moment you gambled with my trust." His new girlfriend didn't appear, but through her lawyer offered to contribute toward damages in exchange for confidentiality. I accepted. Silence, I'd learned, cuts sharper than scandal. As for Maurice and Laverne, they pleaded on the phone. You were once our daughter. Do you really want to destroy this family? I'm not destroying anything, I told them. You mistook kindness for weakness. I'm simply reclaiming what's mine. The court sided with me. Between the house sale, repayment agreements, and alimony, I recovered over $160,000. More than numbers, I recovered my spine. I listed the duplex, now gleaming with renovations I'd chosen, and sold it within weeks to a young black couple who adored the layout. Net profit, around $45,000 after expenses. Not fortune money, but freedom money. Enough to fund the life I'd always meant to live. For the first time in years, I invested in myself. I enrolled in a wealth management course, hired an independent advisor, and began studying markets with the same diligence I once poured into corporate reports. The more I learned, the more the past felt like tuition rather than loss. On a crisp autumn evening, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse apartment, overlooking Lake Marin. The sunset streaked the water with honey gold. My parents visited often now, my mother's eyes shining with quiet pride, my father patting my shoulder. You're stronger than I ever imagined, he said. And I was. I wasn't the Zuri who once thought love required sacrifice without limit. I was the Zuri who understood that not everyone deserves the heart you hand them, and that sometimes silence, paired with evidence and patience, is the sharpest justice. Do I regret loving Quentin? No. Without him, I wouldn't have discovered my limits, or how far I could rise once I stopped carrying someone else's weight. The truth is simple. Some stories end not with bitterness, but with clarity. I let go of a man, his family, and their debts. In return, I gain myself. And that, I've learned, is the most valuable profit of all. Zuri's story reminds us that true power isn't in how much we give others. It's in knowing when to stop, reclaim our worth, and invest in ourselves. Betrayal may break the heart, but wisdom rebuilds the future. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe, like, and share so more people can see that justice, patience, and self-love are the strongest weapons we have. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Zuri's shoes?